Reading 47 from the Psychological Commentaries on the Teaching of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky by Dr. Maurice Nicoll, Volume 3, Great Amwell House, October 5th, 1946. Further note on time body. In the previous paper, it was said that the feeling of eternity enters into self-remembering, but not into self-observation. We observe ourselves in passing time. We observe personality, which has been formed in passing time by the action of life. We observe the different I's in it, which have appeared at different periods of time, chiefly through imitation. Essence is not of passing time. It is not a temporal thing. In remembering oneself, one does not remember the personality, but something prior to it, that lies in the direction of essence and can only be reached through it. To remember oneself in the personality would be to strengthen it, to say this is I to it instead of this is not I. If you say I to the wrong thing, you increase its power over you. You do not then separate from it. Life makes us identify with the personality. It naturally makes us identify with what it has itself created in us. The work is to make us cease to identify with what life has created in us and is now doing to us. To remember oneself, to summon up the purest, subtlest feeling of I in connection with some prominent side of personality, would be to identify still more with what life has formed around essence. It would be like washing paint off with paint. The purest, subtlest, most luminous and total feeling of I lies behind the multiple feeling of personality and its uproar of ambitions, anxiety, violence, and negativeness. Into this feeling of I of which I speak, the feeling of eternity enters every moment of time, but in a direction we can never find as long as we are identified wholly with the personality. While the personality is wholly active, the direction is closed. Personality directs us to time, to passing time, that is, life. Diagrammatically, the dimension of eternity enters the dimension of time at right angles as the feeling of time increases by self-observation, and we begin to take time photographs of ourselves, that is, studies of eyes over long periods. The hypnotism of the present moment, registered by the senses, becomes lessened. The present is no longer confined to the instant, but broadens gradually into all one's life as consciousness expands. We begin, in fact, to understand living time. That is, we begin to understand that our lives lie in the invisible dimension of time and are not confined to the snapshots of time that our senses register. The past is living in its own present and is changing. How can it be changing? Through reaching our consciousness. Consciousness is light. Light changes everything. Shut in the prison of the senses, we disbelieve in dimensions other than those of space, which the senses show us. How, if we believe only in what we can see, can we ever develop? How can we touch centers that are suprasensible? How can we undergo change of mind? The first step in the development that esotericism teaches is being a man's meaning. If you believe there is nothing behind the scenes of visible life and that nature created itself, how can you remember yourself? If you believe you are your visible body and that you cease with it, how can you remember yourself? When this work says essence comes down from the stars, it says something that can alter your life. The source of essence is vertical to time. Our origin is not in time, in the past. This is a strange idea, but it is an idea that is necessary. It changes the mind, and this is the first thing necessary. We begin to think in a new way, and how much there is to think about in a new way, and reach back to in one's life, and change. One can see one's life quite differently, but not if one does not understand that it is living and is affected by all we do now and understand now. New understanding is the most powerful force we can create in the work. It comes from new ideas. This force of new understanding not only alters the future, but it alters the past. The whole time body of a person is connected, just as one end of a stick is connected with the other. Tap it anywhere and it vibrates through its length. But the time body is not straight. It is a circle, not quite closed. This brings us to recurrence. The teaching is that if we do not work on ourselves, the life recurs just as before. Nothing is altered. Why? Because we have not altered anything in ourselves. What does it mean to alter something in oneself? It means a growth of essence. If essence grows, it will not attract the same life in recurrence. In the work, by the term development, is meant a new growth of essence. This can only take place by some manifestation of personality ceasing to be active through the power of the work. A man sees through the light of the work and his understanding of it some negative manifestations of himself, let us say. By further observation, he sees it more and more fully, extending through his life, wishing to work on himself, that is, valuing the work practically and not sentimentally. He begins to separate from it in, so to speak, cold blood, deliberately. When he feels himself near the eyes that lead into it, into this bad psychological place in himself, he does not identify with those negative eyes in this place that always exists. If he finds that he is tending to get too close to them, he remembers himself, and when he feels the work, that is, when he is in the presence of the work eyes, he recalls the observations he has made hitherto on this negative state and the moments of insight into it that he has had and what he has understood of the meaning of the work and why he himself is working. In this way he strengthens his aim. He has given himself the first conscious shock and so created new hydrogens, new force. With this new force which he has created, his power of not identifying is increased. Now, work of this kind, which is against one or other manifestation of the personality, produces the right conditions for the growth of essence. A struggle must necessarily take place at every stage of this growth. If personality wins, then there is no growth. Personality and self will absorb the force and remain active, and essence gets nothing and so remains passive. So we must be tempted. One prays not to be led into temptation, but delivered from evil. From personality, here we must think individually. The struggle is between what is unreal and what is real. But in this struggle it is only the light of the work, that is, the force and illumination coming from conscious man in the form of esoteric teaching, as in the work we study, that can separate you from personality. This force is counter to the force of life. It sets up war in the man. But otherwise, essence cannot become active. Life made and keeps personality active. The work is to make personality passive by the methods of the fourth way, so that essence can grow and eventually become stronger than personality, so that a man is no longer worked from outside, from life. This means the emergence of a new man or a new woman. This is the development meant, not an increase of what you are, but the emergence of another new person by making what you are now passive. Along those lines, taught so clearly by the work. If essence grows after personality has been formed, it will not attract the same life in recurrence. But unless a man has another light than that of the visible sun, he will not be able to make personality passive. He will not understand what it means. If he meets some pseudo teaching, his efforts will only increase personality, and he will remain on the wheel of mechanical recurrence. You will understand, therefore, why it is said that a man with right magnetic center is already at a far higher level of being than others, however prominent or scientific, and so on, who are without it and can only believe in their senses. The point of entry into esoteric teaching is the magnetic center, which can distinguish between things of life, that is, A influences, and things of conscious humanity, that is, B influences. Without this point of entry, a man cannot separate himself from personality because the force of life will hold him to it. The development of essence will then be impossible. The man lives and dies a seed, an acorn, and the work says he can be eaten by pigs, a painful business. He forms a source of food for what is beneath the earth. A man into whom knowledge from higher man has entered, who begins to understand and to realize what he is, and eventually sees his own nothingness, who begins to work, this man can make personality passive. That is, the work makes it passive if he is of use. In that man there will be a growth of essence. He will not go round in the same circle of life. If the development of essence becomes full, if the essential man grows to his full stature, he will no longer experience life at the level of this earth. It is that level called the sun that demands the life of man, as well as the earth and moon. The sun demands the developed organism, conscious man. So man was created, a self-developing organism, and given an essence that came from the level of the starry galaxy.